Be patient with yourself now. Be patient. It'll come up. That's it. Perfect. No, no, no. Come on.
This clip shows us the late Larry Scott taking a very young Francis Benfatto through one of his legendary arm circuits. And at the end of the video clip, we're going to hear perhaps one of the most important pieces of advice pertaining to muscle building that we're likely to ever hear.
Be patient. It will come up, Francis. Good. All right, I want you to get a weight. Not this time, but when you do that, get a weight that you can barely make 6 reps. That's excruciating agony. That's the key to that thing growing.
That is such a valuable tip for muscle building. We consistently need to seek out those really difficult reps at the end of the set where the tempo unintentionally slows and your muscle is in absolute agony whilst you attempt to complete the rep. If we can seek those reps out and have the patience during a set to endure that and get to that point, every exercise that you do, every set that you do, every workout for weeks and months and years on end, then we're going to grow muscle and we're going to develop a fantastic physique. It's that piece of advice there that's going to make likely the biggest difference in your ability to build muscle mass. And I've said this so many times, the intensity is so important. The late Larry Scott, unfortunately no longer with us, predominantly competed in the 1960s, won 2 Mr. Olympia contests. He was most famous for his fantastic aesthetic physique and his impressive arm development, top to bottom, some of the best arms ever, no doubt about it, bicep, tricep and forearms. And, you know, in my opinion, the physiques looked a lot more aesthetic back then, the silver and golden ages of bodybuilding. The ratio of arm mass compared to muscle mass on their torso was much higher than it is now. I mean, people like Nick Walker, for example, have to have 23 to 24 inch arms to look balanced. If they lose an inch on their arms, their arms look small compared to their gigantic torso. They've got so much muscle mass on their frame that the arms very, very quickly become overshadowed. And I much prefer the arm dominant physiques of prior generations personally. And I love this clip because Francis Benfatto, obviously a very impressive bodybuilder, even back then as a youngster, so humble, so willing to learn from the master. And then, you know, years later became an incredible bodybuilder, perhaps one of the most aesthetic physiques of all time. And had very, very well developed arms. And clearly utilised a lot of the tips in this video that we can see to help him amass that kind of muscle tissue in the arms especially. Just as a quick reminder, I do offer online coaching exclusively for natural lifters. So if you're someone that's been training for some time but feels like they haven't developed the kind of physique that they feel they deserve, given the amount of time and effort that you've spent in the gym, then check out the description box because I'm going to help you out with the level of knowledge that I have and the accountability that my coaching provides. We can very quickly fix that and give you the physique that you feel that you deserve. And this is a far cry from some of the antics you'll see on social media these days, where waves of lifters with very little, if any, real-world training experience seem to disregard and argue with lifters that are much more experienced than themselves just because they don't fit into the current kind of social media trends or popular scientific literature. Now what I'm going to do next, guys, is showcase 3 workouts and show you training in action. One will be for biceps using the preacher bench, and there'll be 2 separate workouts for triceps. The concept behind these sessions has come from a little pamphlet written by Larry Scott called Arms That Stun. And in this book, he outlines 4 arm workouts for intermediate to advanced lifters, so guys that are really serious about adding muscle mass to their arms in general. And there's some very interesting ideas outlined, the use of giant sets, drop sets, partials, that kind of stuff. Really, really cool stuff, and personally I find it fascinating reading some of these old workouts. So I have tweaked some of the movements to fit me, you know, on a personal kind of comfort level. You know, it might be slightly more uncomfortable for someone to do a curl in a certain way compared to someone else. The grip might have to change and so on and so forth. And I've changed it to help practicality. You know, some of these circuits are not particularly easy to set up in commercial gyms these days. So how have I mitigated that problem and created something that's easy and convenient for me to set up? So you'll get to see that in a little bit. Just a bit of a background as to why I'm training like this now. Why have I changed my training style, at least for arms? Well, I'm going on holiday in a few weeks and I just wanted to trim up a little bit. Nothing crazy, just tighten up by losing a few pounds of body fat. and I didn't want to have to deal with the stress of trying to kind of maintain my strength. You know, I didn't want that grind. My training was, you know, going quite well, but it can get a little bit monotonous. So I just wanted to change things up completely while I was dieting. It's a short diet. Now, if I was doing something much longer, more serious, where maybe I was competing, then most of my training would stay the same. But I think that I would definitely add in some of this arm stuff because I've had such great returns from the work that I've done thus far. But yeah, it's just a shortcut. Just fancied mixing it up a little bit. Now, when I come back from holiday, I'm then in a really good mindset to get back on the grind and go back into that low volume, kind of, you know, lower rep, progressive overload style of training. I'm, you know, mentally and physically very ready for it then. So there's definitely something to be said, guys, of mixing up your training every now and again, if anything, just for the sake of variation, to keep you hungry and motivated to push harder. The first workout in the Arms Done pamphlet features both bicep and tricep work. And it's kick-started off with a very gruelling but interesting giant set for the biceps using the preacher curl bench. It's the double dumbbell curl, the Scott curl, straight into a straight bar preacher curl, and then lastly into a easy bar reverse grip curl for the brachyradialis. He also does some spider curls a little bit later with a straight bar, but I've decided to amalgamate those four together into the same circuit, and that works really, really well, especially with the spider curls at the end. It's just a brilliant finish here, guys. We do some tricep work at the end where I have changed the workout considerably, and I'll go over that in a little bit. So first exercise, we're going to start off with the double dumbbell curl. And this exercise is touted as a heavier movement. Now, what's really, really important is that you must train heavy. Just because you're doing supersets or drop sets or any other advanced training technique doesn't mean that the weight needs to be light. You're aiming to reach the point of failure between 6 to 8 reps every exercise that you do. So 6 reps across 4 movements. It's 24 rep total. But it's absolute agony. Absolute agony. So the first exercise we can see here, the double dumbbell curl. We'll watch what he has to say first.
Cheat it up. Good, Francis. Cheat more. But you got to go down through and unwind. That's too light, see? It is too light for you. Good, Francis. Good. No, say that before burns on the top. Down to where it's just going to fall. Down front of where it's just going to start to fall. Okay.
So this movement's touted as a heavy movement. So you can use a little bit of body language, a little bit of leaning back to finish off the curl. It's not super strict, ideally using as much weight as we can handle. And I can see why he chose the dumbbell curl as the first exercise as opposed to the barbell. Because with barbell, obviously you're fixed into a very aggressive supinated position. And I find fresh, with the kind of weight you'd need to lift to achieve 6 reps, it would be a little bit risky and sometimes quite uncomfortable on the elbows to get that kind of weight that you need on these curls. And by starting with the dumbbell, which is a bit of a freer movement, so we can manipulate the wrists to make that movement more comfortable, ideally supinate as much as possible, but it's definitely easier on the elbows and a nice way to kind of warm up into those slightly more risky and difficult barbell curls later on. Notice that I didn't add any partials to the dumbbell preacher, the top end partials that Larry Scott calls burns, which he asks Francis Benfatto to do during his set. And they're really actually very effective. They feel great. Forget length and partials. These top end partials are amazing. So essentially you just hold the dumbbells and you go down to the furthest point without that weight dropping. Where you feel like it's going to drop if you go any further, and then hoist it back up again. So maybe a third of the rep. And you do, 3 to 5 of those. They feel great. I opted out of that for this set because this was round 3 of the circuit, and at this point my arms were so pumped and in so much pain I thought that the reps would diminish too low on the straight bar preacher if I did any more advanced techniques with this particular set. So now moving very swiftly onto the straight bar preacher curl. Now you must have all the equipment available, and I'd recommend using small weight plates. So if you need to change the weight, say for instance onto the spider curls, you might need to just lower that weight, then you can do so easily. Larry Scott recommends 5 to 6 sets of this thing, or 4 to 5 sets on this, and then 5 to 6 on the tricep circuit. Insane amounts of volume. The pump is just unbelievable. Now on the preacher curl, let's see what Larry Scott has to say. What are his cues for Francis Benfatto as he goes through this set?
Wind, unwind it, and wind it back up. Keep your head down. Great, great. No, you're not done. I want you to do 6 of those. This is for the camera. This is for you. Pick that up. We're not even filming this. Good, Francis. Be patient with yourself now. Be patient. It'll come up. That's it. Perfect. No, no, no. Come on. Come on. Be patient. It will come up, Francis. Good.
And I can see why Francis is struggling. It's not easy training. It's really painful. The idea behind the dumbbells is that you pre-exhaust the bicep ready for the heavily supinated bar curl. So much so that by 2 reps into the set, you're experiencing a lot of pain already. It's very uncomfortable. And you'll see when I come to do my last few reps here on the set, just how slow these reps get. But I was paying very careful attention to what he was saying. You've got to seek out those hard reps, the reps where that tempo drops uncontrollably through fatigue and pain. That's what you've got to endure. You've got to be patient with your reps and set, guys. So yeah, fantastic movement this, and very, very hard. In the notes section, Larry Scott makes it very clear that this should be a super strict movement. And I think personally the juxtaposition between that and the slightly looser form dumbbell curls works brilliantly. I can see why he'd want the barbell curl to be strict. It's just an insanely potent movement when performed with very concentrated form. No matter how much pain you're in, you have to keep curling. And he also mentions the forearms and the wrists, that you should lead the curl with the wrist, almost point the knuckles up towards the head to initiate the curl. And this enables the biceps to follow. When you feel like you haven't got any reps left in the tank, give it a go, squeeze really hard and pull the wrists up, and you might surprise yourself with another rep. But it's not going to be easy, and it's certainly going to be painful, guys. So after these, moving very swiftly onto the easy bar reverse curl. Now I had to play around with this form. It's a little bit different from what you're going to see on this next clip, just for elbow comfort. And also perhaps could have gone slightly heavier on this one as well. Perhaps 1.25 cal. But other than that, it felt great. Forearms absolutely obliterated from this movement. It gives the main kind of bicep head a little bit of a rest before the oncoming pain from the spider curls.
Okay, just cheat it up any way you want. All the way down, all the way back up. Cheat it up any way you want to get up. It's just, the goal is to use heavy, heavy, heavy weights. That's too strict. Cheat more. Good. Cheat more, Francis. Cheat. Okay, good, good. Now,
so Larry Scott is keen on the idea of using looser form on this movement, which unfortunately I wasn't able to do because of some elbow pain. So I had to use a little bit lighter weight than I perhaps could have. And you'll notice that the grip is a little bit narrower. This felt more comfortable for me personally than the wider grip used by Francis, but feel free to experiment. It's interesting to see the combination of looser form with the very, very strict straight bar curls. I can see why he's done that. This one's going to really add some serious mass to the brachioradialis. Perhaps lend itself to looser form than the very strict and hyper supinated straight bar curl. Okay, so now moving on to the last movement. This was done separately in the workout, the first workout in the arm pamphlet that Larry Scott wrote, but I amalgamated it into the circuit and just added it in as a fourth movement. I think it works really, really well. So you want to lean over the preacher bench and make sure there's a gap between your arm path and the edge of the preacher bench. So there's no support on the elbow. It's a free movement. You can see here by this picture kind of what it would look like when Larry Scott would have performed it. And it works really, really well. Fantastic finisher. So I try to do 6 reps as best as I can. I try to touch the bridge of my nose with each rep. And when I feel like I can't do any more, I then do some partials at the top. burns, as Larry Scott calls them. This movement is painful. By the time you're at this point in the circuit, it's just hell on earth going through these reps. And again, he's okay with the idea of using a little bit of body language on this movement. The only real strict movement that he includes in this particular circuit is the straight bar preacher. I think that's very fitting for that kind of exercise. So brilliant circuit. Like I said, I did 3 rounds of this. My arms were so pumped. It's just insane. It's a very, very painful set. But the benefit is it's not really that physically debilitating. So you can repeat, that for a number of sets, as Larry suggests. I wouldn't really like to try it at the very end of a cut, and I'll be very keen to see how I respond once I start adding in more calories after my holiday when I come back to bulking. I think the results will be very impressive. So now moving on to the tricep element of workout 1. This is a 2 exercise combo. The movements I've had to change a little bit because they just weren't practical for my gym setup. And I'll show you what I've gone for in a minute. But first we'll watch the video. We'll see what Larry Scott has to say and how he teaches his student, Francis Benfatto, these 2 movements.
Magic about this at all. It's just like that. But you should be using close to what you use for a bench press. So the weight is as big as you can get it. And it's just close grip supine tricep press, just like that. Okay?
So this is a really good movement. And Larry Scott chooses this because it's less problematic for the elbows over the more popular skull crusher variant. And that's definitely true. However, the problem I had with this particular exercise is that it's very hard to load up and get in position. There's no rack that you can put it in with the easy bar, obviously it's a short bar, plus the fact that I don't train with anyone, so I have to kind of hoist it up into position whilst laying down. And if I'm doing this exercise fresh, it's going to be a considerable amount of weight and it's going to be too awkward to get into position. So I opted for the JM press instead, kind of a hybrid between the close grip press and the skull crusher variant, and the weight's kind of in the middle somewhere. I also did this second for 2 reasons: to reduce the amount of weight that I'm lifting so I can more easily get it into position, so I'm starting it exhausted already, and secondly, my elbow tends to be a little bit uncomfortable at the moment on my left side with movements like the push down and the JM press. So by doing it second, I'm going into that movement pumped and it's a lot more comfortable. That's something to bear in mind. Whenever you get an injury or an ailment, after you get a pump, so after maybe a few high rep sets or doing it in pre-exhaust fashion, that pain tends to disappear and you can actually train it as you normally would do. And that's the reason why I picked the jam press and why it was second. So the first exercise, we're going to watch what Larry Scott would pick for his second movement, and I'm going to show you what I opted for instead.
Okay, ready? Okay, then. Just bring it all the way back as far as you can, and drop down at the same time. Okay, then extend it out. Okay, Francis? All the way, lock out, and then all the way back. And then as you come back, drop down. So it's stretching in here. Good. Good, that's it. Feel it right up in here? It's going all the way into here. We'll build a tremendous set of triceps on you. All the way back.
So this is a very unique movement, and we can see from the video that the stretch on the tricep is going to be insane. You're going to get your tricep into a very lengthened position. It's probably easier to do that laying down than it is standing up. It can be a little bit awkward, place a little bit too much stress on the lower back in some cases when you're doing overhead extensions. But again, much like the close grip press, it was just a little bit awkward to set up. I tried it on various pieces of kit, low row, kind of on a low bench. I just couldn't get the kind of piece of kit that he was using, and he mentions this in the notes that he almost had it kind of made for purpose in the end in these gyms with a very long kind of rope attachment, and it's just not feasible to do. So instead of that, I opted for what I thought would perhaps be the next best thing, and that was the seated incline V-bar press down. I wanted a good stretch on the triceps, and that certainly does it, but it's just a little bit easy to get into, and I can also superset between the two very easily. All I need is one cable station and a flat bench and an easy bar next to it, and I'm good to go. So it doesn't require much kind of moving about. And yeah, it's a brilliant movement, really, really good. You can go quite heavy. Just make sure when you're pulling the weight out, you're leaning forwards and down so that you don't kind of fling back when you're lifting decent loads. Ideally 6 to 8 reps, nice and heavy, and then by the time you move on to the JM press, your triceps are truly pumped. And the JM press then just for me feels a lot more effective. I feel like I get more from it because I'm going into it with my triceps already warm. And yeah, that combination just works really, really well for me. I did 3 rounds of this, and you can see from that first clip on the jam press that I did some kind of close grip press when I'm fully exhausted at the end on that last set, just to kind of finish him off. But give it a go. Now you'll see that I'm using the V-bar as well. That's something else that I'd like to add. Really, really underrated attachment for the triceps. I've been using it lately to great effect. And you'll see it being used on the next superset that I go into. Really, really underrated piece of kit, guys. Fantastic. So this next workout's a little bit different. It's for triceps again. And it's not really straight from the Arms That Stun pamphlet. It's just something that I've kind of made up using the book as inspiration for. And it works really, really well. So basically what I do, guys, I train arms as a muscle group. You know, I don't do anything else with arm training at the moment. So I do bis and then tris. So I stick to the preacher curl supersets circuit, and I do that every single time. And I do 2 to 3 sets on that. And then I follow it up again with some tricep work. I'll do either the workout you've just seen or this next workout, 2 to 3 sets. This next one's really, really simple to do. You only need one piece of kit, and that's cable attachment from a high position or a lat pull down. I prefer the lat pull down. It just feels a little bit better for me. And the second movement's slightly easier to perform because of the leg rollers that you usually put your knees under on the lat pull down. It's a brilliant combination. I'd recommend using the V-bar attachment. Again, like I said, it's really underrated. It forces the elbows to stay tight. And for me, it just feels a little bit better on the lockout than the straight bar. Also at the moment, I was forced into this basically through an injury. My elbow just feels really uncomfortable in any kind of straight bar movements, overhead extensions, straight bar push downs. And on the V-bar, it just feels more manageable, more comfortable. And since through using it, I've actually found that it's my preferred choice of attachment now. So you're going to do some heavy push downs. Now, just because you're doing supersets doesn't mean you need to be training light, guys. You still want it to be heavy. So work up to a good weight where you can do 6 to 8 reps. So ideally, that next rep that you're going to perform would be failure. You wouldn't be able to do it. That's the point you need to get to. Then immediately go into some push-outs, some front-facing extensions, and you're going to tuck your hamstrings underneath the rollers that you use on the lat pull down. It works so well because it kind of just pushes you down a little bit, just adds enough purchase so that you can stay down, and you're going to push out and down, making sure that you get a full stretch on the way back, keeping your elbows in fairly close, making sure that you lock out. Now, when you're locking out, you really want to accentuate that outwards movement. You can just about do it at the V-bar. So your elbows are pointing outwards, not down. I find I get a much better contraction when I do that on the push-out movement. You might need to lower the weight slightly, a couple of notches, obviously. Do that. You can do that nice and quick. You know, it's no problem. And then you perform again 6 to 8 reps on that movement. Rest for a couple of minutes and go again. It's super simple, and the pump that I get from this, guys, is insane. Again, that second movement, whenever you're doing pre-exhaustion or giant sets, your second movement, your third movement is always going to feel a lot better than if you're starting with it fresh. You're going to reach that point where that sensation is fantastic much more early on in the set. Instead of it be doing, you'd be reaching it at maybe at your 10th rep, you're now reaching it on the 2nd or 3rd rep. So it allows you to keep that weight at a kind of moderate level and the reps down low, but the sensation is equivalent to doing higher rep sets. It's brilliant. And I think there's definitely a lot to be gained from training like this. You know, to experiment and play around with different styles of training is really fun. And I think there's some results to be had there. So that's my arm workout, guys. At the moment, it's working for me. I have noticed some small increases in size, and I'm not bulking at the moment. Just from certain angles, I see my arms in a certain position, straight, and I think, you know, they're maybe looking a little bit thicker. I'm very keen on trying this when I go back into a bulk. I'll probably keep one session as standardised, you know, one exercise for bi, one for tri. just working on progressive overload, but I do want to keep this style of kind of workout in at least once a week, and have it on a day where I have a refeed ideally, so lots of carbohydrates coming in to fuel the higher volume. Give it a go, guys. If you're struggling for arm growth, there's nothing to lose. You've got nothing to lose. Try everything. That's what I recommend to people. Don't be closed-minded. Don't follow the scientific literature blindly, especially if you're going to place these barriers and limitations on what you can and can't do. You will be surprised with what you can handle and what gives you results. I guarantee you, guys. I guarantee you. So give it a go. Give yourself, 12 weeks. Eat like an absolute maniac. Try this workout 2, 3, 4 times a week and see what you can do. I promise you, your arms are going to grow. So yeah, really, really interesting style of training. Blast from the past, if you will. This style of training was very popular in the 60s and 70s, usually done at the end of full body routines. Obviously, the way I train, I have to split it because of time management issues, so I train arms on its own. But hopefully you enjoyed the video, guys, learned a little bit, and good luck if you try this out. Let me know what you thought of the video in the comments, and I'll see you on the next one.